Okay, welcome to the panel, Exploring Pathways. I'm Alan Casline. On my right here is Mark W. O'Brien, and on my left is Claudia Stanek. And it's pertinent that we're saying pathways, since there are three of us up here, and we'll be discussing pathways in three different ways, three or more different pathways. I went to the dictionary, as we do at times, and looked up the origins of the word exploring and the word pathway. And there were a couple interesting little things that I discovered. One is that explore means actually to cry out. And it probably was from the outcry of hunters on sighting game. Pathways, excuse me, was interesting. Something obvious that I hadn't stopped to think about is that a pathway implies that someone's gone ahead or something has gone ahead for there to be a pathway, and the word was trodden ground. And actually we were talking about it last night in the kitchen, and I think it was Charlie Rossiter who said that animal paths would go on ahead of you. So, you know, maybe they were the first creators of these pathways that we wish to follow and explore. Okay, so I'll start with my presentation. It's called 64 Changes, which is people who've known me a long time know that that's the title of a book that's never been published, which soon will be published by Foothills. But what that book is there's something called the I Ching, which is a book, ancient Chinese book, which is on one level an oracle fortune-telling book, and on another level a philosophy and way of life book. And although maybe I didn't start out doing it, at some point 30 years ago, I consulted the fortune-telling book by using a method of tossing copper coins and getting from that a 6-line hexagram. So I had probably a handful of those poems, and I suddenly realized that I had a lifetime project, because I wasn't going to start in one and go to 64. I was actually going to throw the coins each time, and then whatever hexagram I got would then become the hexagram poem. So some of them there's more than one, you know. There might be, I think there's maybe one of the hexagrams I might have 3 poems for, but finally I got to the end and I only had a handful left. And then I cheated from then on out. You know, I said, okay, these are the last 5. You know, when the moment is right, I'm going to write each one of these. You know, and finally I'll get there, which I did. I'm not really totally to blame. Ken Warren can be somewhat to blame, and John Roach can be somewhat to blame. I shouldn't say blame, but using the I Ching as kind of a pathway for us to find a direction and an outcome for Cloudburst probably came from me as much as anyone, but everyone else can share that. But it's been very interesting the way it works, if you believe it works. So I thought I'd start out with that. Why would you want to... The name Cloudburst, yeah, came from the first throw of the hexagram, which was about that particular energy.
Does that mean we're only going to have 64 of them?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So why would someone believe? And Carl Jung, there's really only one translation of the I Ching that you need to know about, which is this one. It has a foreword by Carl Jung, and it's translated by Wilhelm from Chinese into German, and then translated from German into English by Carly Baines. Got that written down. Carrie F. Baines, Richard Wilhelm's translation into German, and Baines into the English. Just as a side, she's interesting in that she is, and John and I had a bet on this, she is a female, not a male. And the reason I know she's a female is because I found out that she was married to Jamie D'Angelo, and they divorced, and she ended up going.
Necessarily prove a thing.
What?
Could be a guy.
Oh, it still could be a guy. Oh well.
Probably not.
All right. Well, I don't want to jump. I don't want to jump ahead, but that'll come up again. So anyway, I've got a poem which is called "Memory Tricks." For my whole life, what I wanted to do, what I'm here on earth for, to be free, to walk along a country road and see a flight of birds fly across and turn and follow their flight, to be so free, to change direction and go a different way, to take my life a different way. And I have. At least once. I remember the day, I remember the road, the sky, the birds. I don't remember where I was going. I don't remember where I went to. So, I mean, I believe that is true. I mean, you might ask, why would someone want to follow birds across the road and change their life like that? And that, to me, fits into the idea of, is the world a teacher of us? Can the world teach us anything? You know, and it's a big question for a person to answer for themselves. I mean, I obviously believe that the world does teach us. In terms of the I Ching, you know, this is like a magic book, and it's like alive in a sense. And so there's like my 30-year exploration of it has been like a conversation. So on one level, if you don't believe any of that, you could still get value from it just as a philosophy. And Jung said again, which I thought was was brilliant on his part, that we've given up Olympus and the gods in exchange for the psyche, which is a whole open way to look at as we're looking at symbols and mythology and rituals, whatever. They can be looked at as psyche, and when you say your heart, you know, it can have a meaning found through dreams, which for friends of mine who are like the most concrete poets, and if I'm reading a manuscript of theirs, I'm always like looking for their edges, and often there'll be dream poems included in their work. Okay, so I passed out postcard poems, and what I want people to look at is the hexagram, which is the 6 lines which would be on top of the poem. A straight line would be considered to be a positive line, and a broken line would be considered to be a negative line. So the I Ching is extremely old. In fact, it goes older than history. So we don't really know the origins of the I Ching, but the legend is that the creation god of the Chinese noticed the pattern of the world on the shell of a turtle, which was always like an aha to me, because if you're familiar with the native myths, that the world, it rests on turtles' back. So it's the same idea. So, like, we do know, like 5,000 BCE, the I Ching was in use, but it wasn't used in terms of written work. It was used in terms of the symbols that you see. So what at that time I call them wizards, or you call them shamans, or powwows actually. within a tribe would be using this symbol system to perform the act of being an oracle. And so I want everyone to just try to read this symbol as like positive and negative forces and energy. And you know, you don't have to pay any attention to the poem underneath it, but just try to read the symbol, you know, which is, you know, not in vocabulary. It's in another sense. So the idea of which, when they write about the I Ching, when Jung writes about it, and also Wilhelm has written, they emphasize this idea that the Western mind has a really hard time with this. You know, that you can't use your Western mind kind of thinking and come to a place where you can really understand, you know, how that could work. You know, how we could throw the coins and we could get a hexagram, and we could look. Like, I have a question that I tend to use more than any other, which is, how do we proceed? And so you can ask the coins, how do we proceed, and throw it, and then end up with something that, you know, always surprising to us involved in this, has implications. So there actually was a hexagram for this cloudburst that we didn't tell you, or I didn't tell you, or whatever. And what it was is fire over water. So each 3 lines, which adds up to 8 different things, it talks about a different kind of energy in the world, and that would be for images: heaven, earth, thunder, water, mountain, wind, wood, fire, or lake. So what this cloudburst came up with was fire over water, which surprisingly enough is number 64 out of 64. Now this is very, you might think that it would be called after completion. I mean, that would make sense, that you would get all the way through and okay, after completion. But actually 63 is after completion, and 64 is beginning, before completion. That's it. It's before completion, which is so I Ching-y, you know. That like the last one would you know, remind you of that. So I guess my time's probably about running out. I gotta. There's a Chinese saying quoted by Jung: "If the wrong man uses the right means work in the wrong way." And Jung says that is just too true, and it's in sharp contrast to like our belief, I guess, a Western belief, in the right method, irrespective of the person who applies it. So the method is merely the path, the direction taken. The way someone acts is a true expression of their nature. And another beautiful benefit of the I Ching to me is that it has taught me that character is really the wealth. If you can understand that real wealth is character, and it's measured by character. So that finishes my piece here. And we'll pass it on to Claudia.
Well, this is going a little bit differently than what I had originally planned. With Jules, we had talked about, she just has had a book released, and I've got one forthcoming in September. So she and I had discussed exploring pathways in the context of those books. So this is going to be very, very different from what Alan was just addressing, and much more personal in the way that my poetry responds to the exploration of pathways insofar as the poem as a pathway. And I want to give you just a brief background as to why this my aspect pertains in this personal way. A few years back, I got awarded a writer's residency in Białystok, Poland, which no one goes to Białystok, Poland. Everybody thinks Białystok is a fictional place from the play The Producers, right? Well, in Poland, nobody goes to Białystok. It's kind of like if you're born there, you are there for the rest of your life. It's called Poland B. So they wanted to bring in people writing in English to help others from outside of Poland to come to know, hey, there is actually a culture there, and there are poets there, and who would have guessed there's actually women poets there? So that's just a brief background. For me, that enabled me to explore family history, but also cultural history, and to kind of backpedal from, everybody's got grandma come over on the boat story, or mostly everybody. And I wanted to get away from that to figure out, why would somebody really want to spend 6 weeks in the lowest level of the boat, next to the livestock, and more importantly, next to the dung pile? So my poems became a pathway for me to seek that out. And I really appreciated Alan had sent out an email with some definitions of explore and path and way. And those were really provocative to me. They really helped to formulate the direction that I wanted to take in just this brief address. And I wanted to take it into the area of communication insofar as the lack of it or the incapacity of it between people, and to be able to get their feelings across, to be able to explain the reasons why they do things, and how that had an impact on my poetry, which speaks largely of Polonia, which Polonia is not Poland. Polonia is the Polish diaspora living here in the United States. So for one of the poems that I did find in Poland that was very, very influential in helping me to formulate this idea was by a poet named Alicia Rybałko, and it's called A Prayer for the Forbidden Fruit. There's something I pray for each day, O Lord, and you'll never grant it, for it's as alien to you as truth that lies, yet worth as much as a piece of bread in a field full of thistle and weed. You never refuse, you simply don't speak. And that lack of speech is a pathway in and of itself. If we don't speak, if we don't articulate, how are we communicating? For me, one of the means of communication is being able to set characters into a poem and have them, with the fewest amount of spoken words, present a lesson to be learned by the reader and personalized by the reader. So I just want to share with you a short poem called Stakes. Kneeling as if in prayer at the Lutheran church on Sunday morning, Dad prepares to give his big boy tomato plants backbones against the expected weight of their fruit. He savors the menthol cigarette stuck to his lower lip as he unsnakes twine taken from his pocket. Ash falls into soil. He returns smoke to the air, weaves twine around each vine and its stake. I walk barefoot through the dry dirt to his side, eyes at his level. Why do they need to stand up so straight? He bends the end of one toward me, singles out the small bubble of green beginning to grow. If tomatoes lie on the ground, they will rot and be no damn good to eat. He puts the unused twine back in his pocket, smacks the last cigarette from its pack, lights the end, and extracts all the dead butts from the ground. Just the minimal amount of words between two people and all of the very small and insignificant details happening around that conversation are the pathway into this poem and into the relationship of that father and that daughter. Excuse me. Another aspect that Alan had sent in his email was exploration can mean to range over for the purpose of geographic discovery, which I think is very interesting. My mouth is dry, I'm sorry. I grew up in a part of Polonia that was bordered on a heavily German-American town. And there was a lot of non-communication around the fact that the Catholic Poles did not appreciate the Lutheran Germans that were right next door because there was obvious class distinctions. And it created a whole microcosm of a geography of less than 5 miles of potential hostility. And it was interesting growing up for myself as being half of one and half of the other and not being able to reconcile the whole put together. So the exploration of that was wonderful. In Pathways, that is extremely important to me, especially since you, Alan, broke it down into path and way, because a way can mean a way. Oh, Dwayne, thank you so much. A way can be a way of living. It can be a way of transportation. It could be a religious way of salvation or other form of communication with the spirit world. And I found that extremely interesting and also extremely relevant to my own work. And what I did want to share with you about that is complete nonverbal communication and how it can really be much stronger than words spoken between two people. I'd like to read you this prose poem. The Lesson. The babushka knew country rats could learn as much as children, how repeated effort without correction bolstered vermin courage. Each time the feed shed's door hinge squeaked, they scattered at her armed chase. She thought to bait a box trap their instinct could not resist. She stoked the wood stove, brought her grandson from his studies to observe. A poker flamed, glowed past red to white. With gloved hands, she retrieved one of the thieves, burned out each eye, and released it. The boy swallowed his tears when she slapped his cheek with her ungloved hand as the fire cooled. For these two characters, there were no words that could have communicated the importance of learning the hard lessons in life, of learning the importance of communicating without words, and the devastation of that chosen pathway of lesson without any verbal communication. Pathways can be cruel, pathways can be joyous. They are not yellow brick roads, except in books. And I don't think they are necessarily yellow brick roads in our poems either. I find that communication is perhaps the most intense form of a pathway. We cannot go somewhere without our GPSs. or our iPhone or Siri talking to us if you have an iPhone. We can't seem to function in one day. Just try to go through one day choosing the pathway of not communicating verbally with anyone and see how long into the day you can actually succeed to get. And then my challenge to you would be take that experience, take it home with you, find that as a pathway for your own poetry, and bring that nonverbal communication into the words you choose to use on the page and see how that impacts the way that you think, the way that you write, and the way that your reader ultimately will draw from you what you want them to read. I think that sums what I have to say.
An Irishman with a mic is a dangerous thing.
Sorry, you hear that.
Can't talk about it.
With or without a mic?
Well, somebody said yesterday, don't get him started, he'll just keep going on and on and on. This is, some of you know I've been invited to go to Ireland to read at the Fermoy International Poetry Festival. About 3 years ago, I joined this poetry group online just because it was in Ireland. Then found out about 6 months ago through a random instance sitting in a doctor's office with my iPhone, going through forums, a third cousin who happened to have a speckled notebook written by a mythical person from my past that my father had talked about, Aunt Winnie, who actually is a cousin. And she had written down in there all of these family recipes and things and the connections that I had thrown my hands up in the air and said, I'll never figure this out. There are 4 lines of O'Brien in my family that came together in the Pittsfield area. And come to find out, the main line of O'Brien that I come from literally comes from the town of Fermoy, which, just kind of like when I found that out, it was like, I'm going home, Last year about this time I was writing these pieces that were about being part of the Irish diaspora. If you'll notice, my Irish flag is the farthest one away because that's the way it's always been. We're exiles. So I'm gonna. This is my connection to all this. And Imram, or Imrama, or voyage, in Irish literature, is a class of old Irish tale concerning a hero's journey into the other world, or the plane of joy. They were written in the pre-Christian era and are essentially Christian in aspect, but preserve Irish mythology at the same time. The Imrama are definable by their focus on the exploits of the hero or heroes during their search for the other world, located in these cases in the islands far to the west of Ireland. The hero sets out on his voyage, or outing, as some translations call it, and that's, for me, outing, much more the way I feel about it, as instead of a pathway or a pilgrimage, it's an outing. It's going. Okay, for the sake of adventure or to fulfill their destiny, and they are generally stopped along the way at several fantastic islands before reaching their destination. Islands of women who tempt them and threaten their virtue, etc., etc., etc. But unlike Ulysses, however, in the Irish stories, the adventurer hardly, if ever, finally reaches the plain of joy and completes his journey home. In the typical Irish fashion, one of two things often happens. The hero, having traveled for hundreds of years, returns and reaches the shores, and if he does get off the ship and step on the shore, instantly turns to dust. In some of the other stories, he's waved off, and he continues on the ship, forever lost on the seas, and never gets home. There's a scene in the movie The Devil's Own, starring Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford. "Don't look for a happy ending," is the quote. Don't look for a happy ending. This is not an American story. This is an Irish one. So, that having been said, from my American point of view, I'm going to read you something that came together through all of this research. And I'm American. I can't read the Gaelic to you, okay? But I'm going to give you the translation, which is The Adventures of O'Brien's Children. On a journey of weakness, often by a leap of impetuosity, the grave is found in haste when you dive into the trench of a graveyard. How many more years, we cried, must we search for the plain of joy? Only just begun, said the Druid, as he melted wax in our ears. Let sirens sing their songs, we said. From Liverpool to New York Harbor, our ships are coupled together so that none may move way and be lost. So 9 waves from the shore, Manannan waved his magic cloak of mist until we were 3 days and nights asleep. When up the Druid spoke, "Rise, no rest until you reach yonder plain." "What plain is that? And where?" asked we. "Farther than Scythia," spoke the poet. "It's not yourselves who shall return, but your children's children's children." We climbed the masthead then, and looking back, saw Ireland on an evening of a day in winter, and a fair island we saw upon the sea. 2. How be it now then, O sons of Mill, 150 years, your ships upon the main? Do sirens still sing their songs, while Druid melts wax in your ears? Are your ships still coupled together, that none move way and be lost? When the great wind of famine blew, you became the ocean's denizens, always 9 waves away, where you suffered still more hunger and thirst. When at last was reached the great promontory, Maracay, why did you drink the sweet wine of deception for so long? And how many more years will your children long for home? Only but halfway, intones the Druid, as he melts even more wax in your ears. 3. What will happen if we get there? This place of plain, of joy, whisper children's children, sailing endlessly against the main. Will the siren song linger on, with Druid still by our side? With our ships coupled, what of those who fell away and were lost? It is a different kind of famine drives us now, with a longing that was passed on down, and with little manna for our mourning, like gnashing and grinding of teeth. This homesickness stirs within us. We yearn for shores of home, while Siren Tiger calls us back by our paddied wallets. Almost there, tempts the poet with a poem. What will come to pass, we wonder, if we set foot on this plain of joy? Will we fall to ash upon the shoal as our fathers did, leaving naught but wax from our ears? Or should we feign instead to sail across the sea forever, endlessly chasing tears? So, this was me last year, before all of this transpired. Now I'm going there. I'm a little scared, you know. Am I going to turn to dust when I get off the plane, you know? This is a pathway yet, you know, to be explored. So, next year, to be continued.
Okay, we have 2 minutes for questions. Any people different? Okay, start here.
After Paul Silence, I don't know if you know that it has been written by the Polish cinematographer Kozlowski, who did his whole series called Decon, that he was not going to do it for film, but for video to be used at home, because he was afraid that people were not ready after the Second World War to discuss these things publicly and could better discuss them in the privacy of their own home. One other thing, many Jews in the onslaught of the Nazis into Poland did flee to Bialystok.
And as a side note to that, there was actually, when I was in Bialystok, that wasn't a good move for a lot of them because the temple, they were herded into their temple and the temple was burned down, and there's all that's left is the ironwork and the government.
David?
I'll take that because
Get it out this side. All right, wait a minute.
I think it's wonderful that this has all evolved towards the inevitability of incompletion of the pilgrimage. It's not going to happen. And even the number 64, I don't know how many people know that the Eye of Horus in Egypt is made up of symbols that represent fractions. And they add up to 63 64ths because it was never to end.
You said the Eye of Horus?
Yes.
Egyptian god?
I was struck by the number 9 waves, because waves repeat in patterns of 7. And so to focus on 9 means to be 2 away from the pattern. Do you have any comment?
The 9 waves is the 9 waves is the common distance in the Celtic Irish mythology. That's where I picked that up from, and I exactly what you're saying is I think it's not just, you know, it's that even farther removed than you would expect to be removed. That was my interpretation.
Once you hit the 7th wave, then you're in the pattern that carries you to
To the shore, but you're not. You're you know, that much farther removed.
But the Druids wrote thought in threes. That was like the same number. So
Yeah.
many three or multiple of 3. Their verses. Try it.
Yeah, this is
Sets.
Oh, sorry. I'll let you finish. I pointed to it, my fault. Maybe if you weren't finished.
I said the Druids thought in 3. So any thing that was 3 or a duplicate of 3, a multiplication of 3 was good. Like their verse is in 3-line stanzas, a tercet. it's probably the 9 as opposed to your more logical 7. Our cells renew every 7 years.
Makes 7 more logical than
Yeah, the
Well,
7
because it's
comes
got a
from
scientific
the
basis.
way the waves form.
Oh, you were talking about waves. I thought you were talking about cell renewal.
Ah,
Oh, the human cells renew in the body. Takes 7 years to go through.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my line had to do with 9 waves.
Yeah.
So he's saying that the physical, actual, waves pattern is 7.
Oh, that's okay.
So it much like, for me, what he said, the 9 works makes even more sense and is more poignant to me because it's too beyond, what would actually eventually bring me to shore.
Alan, you said you were going to return to something about Harry Baines?
No, it was about at the I Ching. One of the things to learn in learning the book is that it's patriarchal. The two main, it's yin yang. I mean, the two main hexagrams, 3 straight lines is the male, or heaven, or the father, and 3 passive broken lines is the female, earth, and the mother. So that's in there. If you're going to read the I Ching, you're going to run into that whole like breakup among the family, which is a very kind of traditional family structure. And I read an article recently that actually the Chinese government, the communist government, one of their reasons to repress the I Ching is because they don't want the family to have that kind of status over the state.
But just to clarify that if you look at the images and the initial for each hexagram, what is listed as the image and the initial short kind of poem that follows is the older version, and then there are Confucianist commentaries that were written hundreds of years later, and the Confucianists tended to really emphasize the authoritarian, patriarchal, and so forth things in their commentaries more so than in the earlier. So there's, I'm not contradicting you, but there's more.
No, I mean, that's why I focused on the image symbols themselves, which existed prior to any of the writing. And there was a particular person who's given credit for King Weg, they call him, but about 1150 BC, that far along, which was still before Confucius, who really made the order, and actually it was switched. The female was 1 and the male was 2, and at that point it was switched. And before that point there was, there were various orders of how you would order all 64, but the commentaries came even later, which were essentially sometimes attributed to Confucius, but not really Confucian. And then even later than those, there were what John is talking about, maybe more so, all this social stability, evoking civil servants had to demonstrate their knowledge of the I Ching before they could be promoted, or appointed. All that was a whole other thing, which is interesting. But I'm always more of a purist. Like I love the idea of, back in 500 BC. In fact, Tom, can you put the music on? One of the things that the I Ching is interesting is that its fragments are the oldest. Within the oldest parts of the text, there are fragments of even older texts, and they go back to before history, before any record. And there's also music, this is the Jin melodies, which is the same in that it's some of the oldest music that's known, and within it are fragments of even older music. So I brought this.
I think it's worth pointing out that the I Ching introduces the hexagram system that then becomes the basis for Tai Chi, Qigong, Feng Shui. Every aspect of Chinese civilization is embedded in that hexagram sequence. Acupuncture, it's all based on the same 1263 system.
I have a question for Claudia.
Yeah.
You ended with some observations of using silence to transcend the mediation of the senses to directness. You also studied at Bennington, and I was wondering what you might have by way of relating art, method, mediation, and directness through emptiness.
Easy question.
Simple.
Simple question, not easy to answer. One of the things about Bennington was we were all very much encouraged to follow a singular path that was unique to each one. So that kind of, the approach that I gave to all of you at the end, that came more from what I had internalized, not so much has experienced at Bennington. There had been an ongoing, and had Liam Rector lived, there would still be an ongoing debate about the place of the I as opposed to the emptiness and the mediation. But Liam is gone, so I think that whole debate has rather been toned down, if not ended. Not because there was anything wrong with it, just because he's no longer there to promote his viewpoint. So I can't really answer your question the way you might like, because my experience there was very different, and everyone's was. One of the neat things about Bennington was you could pursue your own path and were encouraged to do so, and it could incorporate many, many, many different things. Sorry.
Sounds like a good answer.
Yeah, sounds like an answer to me.
Okay, I don't know if dinner's ready, but it probably is lunch, and I'm going to end. Now, we're having like a couple optional events, which one is a trip off campus. We'll caravan to a burning spring. And the other is paper making here on campus. And the third thing you can do is none of those. And yeah.
Stephen. Lunch is ready. And lunch is